What if Africa's redemption wasn't hiding in palaces, policies, or parliaments, but behind prison walls? What if the forgotten hands of the condemned held the power to feed a starving nation? In Burkina Faso, that what if has become reality. Captain Ibrahim Traoré didn't simply reform prisons, he flipped their purpose. Where once there was steel and silence, now there is soil, sweat, and second chances. Ask yourself this. How often does Africa get to lead with its own ideas, not borrowed, not funded by foreign donors, but born from pain and planted with pride? While the world debates rehabilitation, Burkina Faso digs into the ground and redefines it. Instead of punishment, prisoners are being trained, trusted, and transformed. They farm wheat, rice, cassava, not just to survive, but to serve. 1 month in the field earns them 3 months off their sentence. But more than time, they're gaining tools, purpose, and dignity. This isn't a charity case. It's not optics. It's a system built with intention, rooted in tradition, and growing futures from the most unlikely places. So before you dismiss it as a stunt, listen closer. This is not the story of prisoners. It's the story of a people reclaiming what was stolen: land, voice, and hope. This is Africa rising from the dust. In a continent where punitive justice often resembles colonial relics, rigid, repressive, and wasteful, Captain Ibrahim Traoré dared to flip the script. For decades, African prisons mirrored systems imported from Europe, overcrowded, under-resourced, and ultimately ineffective. But Traoré saw a broken system and asked a radical question. Why waste human potential when it could be cultivated like the land we neglect? His answer wasn't to soften crime, but to redefine justice. He introduced a simple yet revolutionary policy: for every month a prisoner spends working on a farm, 3 months are deducted from their sentence. The idea wasn't just to offer incentives, it was to offer identity. To say to a man once jailed for stealing bread, here is a shovel, build your redemption. These are not labor camps. These are agricultural academies in disguise. Prisoners learn soil science, irrigation techniques, and crop cycles. They study how to grow not just food, but a future. This is state-supported, expert-guided transformation where inmates graduate not with shame but with a skill set, a savings account, and a stake in society. No longer nameless numbers in orange uniforms, they are referred to as farmer trainees with names, titles, and production quotas. Their plots are not punishment but platforms for rebirth. And for the first time, many of them feel seen not as threats but as contributors. When the first prison fields were tilled, skeptics scoffed. This is naive, they said. Prisoners can't farm. They'll sabotage. They'll fail. But what emerged was not failure. It was food, and lots of it. Yams, maize, millet, sorghum, staples of the Burkinabe diet, now grow on land once feared and fenced. The crops supply school cafeterias, military kitchens, and drought-stricken communities. And the impact? It's seismic. First, the economics. The cost of feeding prisoners dropped drastically. Instead of importing rice and subsidizing meals, prisons now feed themselves. Second, the agricultural surplus began showing up in local markets. Then came the private contracts, restaurants sourcing produce from prison farms, co-ops hiring ex-inmates to scale production. But the most remarkable shift: ownership. Traoré's model didn't stop at training. It offers transition. After release, select inmates are granted access to reclaimed public land plots previously hoarded by elites or left unused. These individuals, once shunned by society, are now landowners in training. With the tools, skills, and savings earned in prison, they launch small farms, hire family members, and reintegrate not as ex-offenders, but as agricultural entrepreneurs. One former inmate, now managing a 5-hectare tomato farm, said, "Prison gave me the freedom to grow not just food but myself." It's not charity, it's strategy. The state profits from taxed farm earnings. Villages benefit from fresh jobs. Markets gain new suppliers. And most importantly, crime recedes. Why steal when you can plant and sell? Why reoffend when you've tasted dignity? The ripple effect is undeniable. Local blacksmiths now receive state contracts to forge tools. Silo builders, transporters, and seed sellers all see an uptick in orders. What was once considered a drain, the prison system is now a shock absorber for economic instability. Burkina Faso's GDP from agriculture has ticked upward for the first time in years, and much of that surge can be traced to one unlikely sector: prison farms. In the narratives of African justice reform, one group is often overlooked: incarcerated women. Forgotten, stigmatized, and often abandoned female inmates across the continent have suffered a double punishment: isolation from society and invisibility within it. But under Traoré's bold initiative, that silence has been shattered. In the heart of Ouagadougou's correctional facility, a once neglected wing now bursts with greenhouses and medicinal herb gardens, all cultivated by women who once had nothing but despair. Today they manage aloe vera, moringa, and onion farms that feed directly into Burkina Faso's school lunch and maternal health programs. And it's not just manual labor. These women are trained, certified, and organized into state-supported cooperatives. They are taught vertical farming techniques, irrigation, logistics, and herbal processing. Some now manage greenhouses that rival professional agritech labs. Others have become community mentors, training new arrivals and offering them more than just hope, but tools. One former inmate, Isor, now runs a cooperative supplying natural ingredients to pharmacies across the capital. Her income surpasses that of many government clerks. Another, named Mayam, has trained over 50 women in greenhouse management, each of them now equipped to feed their families and rebuild their lives. What's the result? Recidivism among female prisoners in this program is nearly zero. But more than numbers, this is about narrative. In a world that often strips imprisoned women of voice and value, Burkina Faso gave them machetes and megaphones. They're not begging for reintegration. They're demanding space at the table as workers, leaders, and mothers of national progress. Their children eat better, their villages are safer, and their dignity replanted, just like the gardens they tend. No revolution survives without a story. And Traoré, the young military captain with the soul of a strategist, knows that power is not just built, it must be broadcast. As Western media circled eager to paint the prison farm initiative as forced labor, Traoré launched a full-scale counter-narrative. The government rolled out a documentary series titled Seeds of Change, featuring real stories of prisoners turned providers. TikTok reels, Instagram lives, and drone footage from prison fields flooded social media. One viral clip showed an ex-prisoner hugging his daughter next to his cassava plot, whispering, "She used to visit me in chains. Now she comes to see my farm." Public opinion shifted overnight. Influencers toured facilities. Independent journalists documented the results. Suddenly, critics had to explain away, not propaganda, but results. And the campaign wasn't just external. Traoré's Ministry of Communication launched a dedicated justice reform channel, broadcasting updates in multiple dialects across rural regions. Farmers who had never seen a courtroom now discuss restorative justice at market stalls. Youth who once dreamed of fleeing to Europe now talk about starting agri-cooperatives with reformed inmates. This is not spin. It's storytelling, decolonized and unapologetically African. In Traoré's Burkina Faso, prisoners don't just grow crops. They cultivate credibility, they redefine patriotism, and they prove that even those at society's margins can be authors of a national rebirth. This isn't just a policy, it's a movement. What started in a single correctional facility in Burkina Faso is now echoing across borders. Delegations from Mali, Guinea, and Niger have quietly arrived to study the system. Think tanks from West Africa are publishing policy briefs with one question on the cover: can this be scaled? The answer is unfolding in real time. Traoré is no longer just managing a reform, he's engineering an exportable blueprint. Talks are underway to formalize regional cooperation on prison agriculture. Pan-African agricultural unions are examining how to integrate ex-prisoner co-ops into existing farming networks. Even the African Union has taken notice, scheduling panels to review the Burkina model. And at home, expansion is already in motion. Cold storage hubs are being constructed. Agricultural radio stations are broadcasting to train new inmates. Drones and soil sensors are being introduced into the program. Traoré isn't just multiplying farms, he's scaling sovereignty. In a continent tired of borrowed solutions and imported answers, this homegrown model offers something radical: dignity that's not handed down but grown from the ground up. Land once used for exploitation is being reclaimed for redemption. This isn't just Burkina Faso's story anymore. It's Africa's future sprouting from the soil of its past. Burkina Faso has done more than reform its prisons. It has reimagined the very function of punishment, purpose, and progress. Where once there were cells of despair, now there are rows of maize, greenhouses of moringa, and hands that once clenched in defiance now digging deep into the earth, searching not for escape, but for renewal. This transformation didn't come through charity or the benevolence of outsiders. It came from within, from the conviction that even those cast aside can become cornerstones of national revival. The numbers speak volumes. Food production is up. Recidivism is down. National pride is rising. But beyond statistics lies something deeper, a moral reset, a decision to believe that a man, no matter how broken, still has value. That land, no matter how barren, can bloom again. And this is not the end, it is only the beginning. Plans are in motion for prisoner-led farming unions, export cooperatives and eco-villages powered by solar and sustained by self-respect. Women are taking the lead, youth are staying in country. Entire regions are being fed by hands once locked behind bars. This is not a Western dream. It is an African awakening. So, as critics debate whether this bold experiment is risky or radical, the people of Burkina Faso are harvesting proof. Not just sacks of rice or bundles of spinach, but restored identities, reclaimed futures, and the kind of justice that doesn't just punish but plants. And perhaps that's the most powerful message of all, that in the very soil where chains once dragged, hope now grows. So what do you think? Is this model the beginning of Africa's new justice era, or an impossible gamble? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Share this story if you believe that no one, not even a prisoner, is beyond purpose. And subscribe for more stories of a continent not collapsing but rising. Because in Burkina Faso, the fields are not just growing crops, they're growing a future. I watched the story of Burkina Faso's prison farms, with tears that refused to fall, and a fire I could not extinguish. Not because it was new, not because it was perfect, but because it felt like something I had forgotten existed in this continent, a vision of ourselves, by ourselves, for ourselves, and that, my brothers and sisters, is how Africa rising truly begins. For too long we have been told who we are. We have been defined by failure, dependency, corruption. The world has looked at our prisons and seen waste. But what if we looked again and saw warriors in waiting? What if, like Traoré, we dared to believe that even those who stumbled could stand again? That is the seed of Africa reborn. In those fields where prisoners once waited for death, I see something different. I see men who once stole to eat now feeding a nation. I see women once silenced by shame now singing as they plant hope in the soil. This is not fiction. This is not Western charity. This is new Africa, and it is ours to claim. We come from a land rich in culture, but wounded by exploitation. Colonial maps divided our nations. Foreign companies fenced off our land. Our leaders begged while our youth bled. But now, on the very earth where chains once dragged, Africa rising plants her feet. The Burkina model is not just agriculture, it is resurrection. From concrete cells to cassava, rose from despair to dignity. Every hectare reclaimed is a page rewritten in our story. Every prisoner turned farmer is another voice shouting Africa reborn. I look at Traoré and I don't just see a president. I see a mirror. A reminder that leadership need not be perfect, it must only be rooted in purpose. While others sign aid deals and wait for validation, he puts tools in hands and says, work, heal, build. That is new Africa. That is justice turned into bread. Do you not feel it? That something ancient and powerful is stirring again. Our ancestors, whose hands once tilled this continent in chains, now smile from the heavens. Because their children, once caged, are now cultivating freedom. And their sweat was not in vain. This is Africa rising, not because the West says so, but because we choose to rise. I think of the villages now fed by prison farms, of the blacksmiths hired to make tools, of the children going back to school with income from inmate co-ops. This is not policy, it is prophecy, and it is being fulfilled by those we once threw away. That is Africa reborn. To those who still doubt, I say, come see. Walk these fields. Meet these men and women. Shake the calloused hands that now hold both harvest and hope. And then tell me if your heart does not ache with pride. Because this is not a moment, it is a movement. This is Africa rising from within. We must study this model, improve it, replicate it. Let this spirit flow from Ouagadougou to Lagos, from Nairobi to Dakar. Let our prisons become our classrooms, our farms, our redemption grounds. This is New Africa, and it must not end in Burkina Faso. And let us remember, Africa reborn does not mean forgetting the pain. It means using it. Using every injustice, every humiliation, every forgotten name as fuel. Because if a man once condemned can now feed his country, then so can we. And we must. The time of waiting is over. The time of asking is done. Now is the time to reclaim, to restore, to rise. This is Africa rising, not in theory but in soil, in sweat, in systems built by Africans for Africans. Let the world watch. Let them wonder. Let them write articles about radical reforms. We do not need their applause. We need each other. We need belief, courage, and a hoe in every hand. Because this movement is not about one man. It is about us all. We are not broken. We are Africa reborn. We are not begging. We are New Africa. We are not lost. We are Africa rising. Again and again and again. Have you ever looked into the eyes of a hungry child and felt your soul scream in silence? Have you ever asked yourself how many more generations must suffer before Africa claims her right to rise? How long will we watch foreign powers carve up our land, exploit our gold, our oil, our diamonds, while we beg for aid on bended knees? How long will we let our prisons rot our people instead of redeem them? Is this all we are destined to be, victims of history? But then, what if we said no? In the prison fields of Burkina Faso, something is changing. Not just for the inmates, but for all of us. Because when the most forgotten members of society begin to grow food, dignity, and purpose, then what excuse do the rest of us have? This is not just a policy, it's a prophecy. A vision that tells us Africa rising is not a myth. It's a movement. We've cried enough. We've buried enough. Now we must build. What if every African prison became a place of healing, not hiding? What if every hand that once stole to survive now tills land to thrive? What if our systems stopped punishing poverty and started planting possibility? Africa rising is not about waving flags or chanting slogans. It's about getting our hands dirty in the soil of our ancestors and growing something real. But we must ask, are we ready to fight not just for freedom but for function, for a new Africa that no longer borrows blueprints from broken empires? Are we willing to learn, to listen, to build, to reclaim not just land but legacy? Traoré did not wait for permission. He did not ask for validation. He acted with faith, with fire, with fierce love for his people. And in doing so, he reminded us, redemption is not a gift. It is grown. Are we brave enough to follow? Will we allow this vision to stop at one country? Or will we carry it across the continent like a torch? Because this is New Africa, where prisons become farms, where prisoners become farmers, where failure becomes fuel. And we must ask ourselves, if the condemned can rise, why can't we? Let this be our moment. Let this be our revolution. Let Africa rising be more than a hashtag, let it be our harvest.